the reason we wanted to host this call was this is unlike any other project that we have ever done. First of all, on the amount of resources we needed and how people have stepped up. And secondly, that we haven't been able to really communicate with all of our donors the work and the tasks that we've been doing with the money that we have been raising. So I thought this Zoom call might be a way for us to share a little bit more information about what we're doing. And in fact, as we're talking, I know Juliana and I are going to keep checking our signals, because we have a group of 6 young Christian women and 2 Christian convert men who will be hopefully crossing the border any second. So we've been working very hard, but I always tell my donors, and I mean it, that we're partners in this, equal partners. And I've said it and I've meant it, but I never really understood it like this project. On August 13th, I was lying in bed with COVID pneumonia, and the co-founder of Movie to Movement, the actress Jennifer Cadena, called me and said that there was movie producers, an Afghan's mother who made an anti-Taliban documentary who was being hunted, and if I could help get the mother out. And this was something I wasn't thinking of doing, nor imagining I would be asked to do, and didn't know if we could do it. But by God's grace, that mother is now safe. A couple hours later, we got a request from a Marine officer if we could help his interpreter get out. And by God's grace, that interpreter is now safe. But it became 2 names, became 3 names, became 10, became 100, became hundreds. And I think it wasn't until 3 weeks later that I asked myself, wait, why am I doing this? Where's the State Department? And with each task, our budget got bigger and bigger, and we kept asking folks for more and more support. Thanks to LifeSite News and their program Life Funder, we were able to raise over $300,000. And to let you know how our organization works, first of all, our mission is very simple: to defend the vulnerable from violence by promoting the dignity and beauty of the human person and inspiring solidarity. We do that through making movies. That's our Movie to Movement program. And we do that through influence campaigns. That's the Vulnerable People Project. And by influence campaigns, what I mean is we seek to influence powerful people, bring in celebrities and harness their reach, writing white papers and ghostwriting op-eds, and also by influencing institutions and leveraging and partnering with powerful institutions with big budgets and lots of resources. That's normally how we work. But when the United States pulled out of Afghanistan, everything fell apart, and a lot of the organizations became helpless. And then that's when, through all of the resources we were able to raise and through some old friendships I've had, we were able to pick up the ball. And then instead of using big airplanes purchased by large groups or leased by large organizations, we began doing overland operations, and we have been in a constant movement, constantly moving people over the border. So that has all been thanks to you. And so as I always understood that our donors were our partners, if it took me a little while longer to raise money to make a movie, then it took a little while longer to release the movie. No one died. The immediate response of our supporters to partner with us directly resulted in families being saved from really the unspeakable violence. Our speakers today are going to be Juliana Taimoorazi, who was just nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize, and we'll be finding out, I think, Friday night in the earliest hours of the morning, I think on Saturday actually, if she won. And the reason I asked Juliana to join us today is because she herself was in a similar situation where she had to be exfiltrated, or she was in Iran and had to escape for her life. And so she's gone through all of the things that the young women that we're helping now, all the things that they're going through, all of the things that they have felt, Juliana felt. And so that's why I asked her. Following Juliana will be someone who we're calling him John M. And John M. has worked at the highest level in our intelligence and defense, in Afghanistan. He speaks the languages and the dialects. He was wounded there. He has a lot of networks of support there. And thanks to John, we've been able to do what much larger groups have been able to do. So I'll first introduce Juliana. She has a very long and distinguished biography. She asked me to cut it down to give her more time to speak, but she is a leading advocate and speaker for the persecuted church in the Middle East. She founded the Iraqi Christian Relief Council in 2007 to shine a light on the plight of Christians in her ancestral homeland. She was just recently nominated for the Nobel Prize, and I can tell you, because I've worked with her for almost a decade now, starting in Iraq, that she is the most committed, tireless warrior that you have ever met. And that was birthed by her experiences as a young woman in her own escape from tyranny. Juliana, thanks for joining our call.
Thank you, Jason. My warm greetings to all of you. I'm so blessed to be among you. As Jason said, I was smuggled out of Iran in 1989, first to Switzerland and then into Germany. But the entire process of smuggling took about a year in my case, and about a year for my brother. We were smuggled out because we were not really accepted as Christians. We were treated as third and fourth class citizens. And they were trying to force me to convert to Islam because I was attending a Muslim school when I was 13, 14 years old. So, and Jason and I, as Jason said, we have worked together tremendously, and he's my personal hero for everything that he's done in Iraq and for the Uyghurs in China. And when the time came to save the Afghan Christians that I've been in touch with, I ran to Jason because I know he's a man of his word. He is pure, without an alternative motive and an agenda, and he delivers. So we've been really working very closely together. And I'll tell you, the experience these women are going through is much more horrific than mine. At least I was not threatened to be killed on an immediate basis, but these women have been because they're converts to Christianity. In fact, this morning, Jason and I argued a little bit because my Afghan contacts wanted to know exactly their location today. And because I've been through this myself, because I've been through the smuggling process, I know how full of fear this is. These women are by themselves. They don't know the smugglers. Do they trust them? Do they not trust them? So here I am giving them power because I know Jason and I trust Jason implicitly. And I know Jason is not going to do anything to jeopardize people's lives. So I was consoling my contact and their family members. And I contacted Jason today. I said, Jason, where are they? We haven't heard from them in 24 hours. And he was very upset with me. He said, what are you doing? We cannot discuss these things. So just trust the process. But really, I mean, I respect him. So I just was quiet and listening to him. At the same time, he understood later on why I was so impatient, and their families are impatient because of how scary this entire process is. So as we're mobilizing these people, I want to really thank all of you for standing with Jason, therefore standing with me, with these individuals whose lives have forever changed. The fall of Afghanistan, look, in 2003, when America liberated Afghanistan, the reports started coming out that these women that were being forced into marriages, they were pouring acid on themselves to kill themselves, or oil on themselves so they could set themselves on fire. So in 2003, I wanted to help the Afghan women. And fast forward to almost a month ago, 3 weeks ago, when Afghan was again placed on my radar, I knew that we have to speak up for these people because especially women, I lived under Sharia law. I had to cover my hair. I had to abide by their laws. So, and this form of Sharia law that has been again brought in Afghanistan, it is going to be torturous for women and children. So that's why your participation is very important. And I'm going to tell you one thing that I tell my own, because I run a nonprofit myself. I tell this very quick story, Jason, if you would allow me. My mother and my father were born in Russia because during the Armenian, Assyrian, Greek genocide of 1914, my grandparents escaped to Russia. So when my mother and my father, as children, were sent back to Iran because of their parents' citizenship, there was an American priest that came to my mother's school with American GIs to visit Assyrian children, refugees from Russia. That priest, 81 years ago, paid for my mother's education until high school. Therefore, she instilled the love of service in my heart. And that priest, 81 years ago, changed the lives of hundreds of thousands of Iraqi Christians that my ministry impacts. So my message to you is, don't think that you're rescuing just an individual, a human being today. You're rescuing generations to come. So I want to thank you. And Jason, thank you so much for really answering the call to save these 6 women.
Thank you, Juliana. Thank you very much, Juliana. I'm praying that as we do this call, they make it, they cross right as we finish. Thank you very much for all of your work. And we're praying, I told Juliana, selfishly, I'm praying that she wins the Nobel Prize simply so she'll become very useful in fundraising for our efforts to get everyone out of Afghanistan, all of our Christians out of Afghanistan. So that's why
Believe me, please do, all of you. I ask, and in fact, the timing is at 11 a.m. Friday morning, Europe time. So it's, I believe, at 4 a.m. on Friday morning, Eastern time. So as Jason said, this will be such a tremendous win for the persecuted people, Uyghurs and Afghan women and Iraqi Christians. So please, if you would pray, may we bring it to, may we bring the prize home to all of us.
No one can deserve it more. I'm sure there are many who are out there who deserve it equally as you, but there's no one who could deserve it more. So we pray that you win. Thank you, Juliana. So as I found myself with COVID pneumonia, inundated with an Excel sheet it was just me in this office with an Excel sheet that was getting bigger and bigger and bigger. At one point, it finally hit me that I should reach out to my best friend. And when I say that John M. is my best friend, he is my best friend. We're brothers. We've been friends for over 2 decades. And I said to him, as this whole project began to unfold, that I think that our whole friendship by God from its very beginning may have been just simply for this moment. And I think you'll understand when I read his biography. John is a former U.S. government official with over 20 years of experience in strategy, operations, and intelligence across the Middle East and South Asia. He was a member of the U.S. Department of Defense's Senior Executive Services, civilian equivalent to a general officer or flag officer in the U.S. Armed Forces, and directly served 2 American presidents and 3 secretaries of defense. His government work was conducted in roles that included strategic planning, on-the-ground operations, and an analysis for a number of war zones and countries such as Iraq, Afghanistan, Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, Syria, Iran, and China. John has a PhD from a top 3 American university in foreign languages and linguistics, and has native or professional fluency in several East Asian languages, several European languages, and several Near Eastern languages to include Arabic and Persian. He has been personally recognized by 2 U.S. presidents and is the recipient of numerous awards from the U.S. Department of Defense for bravery and outstanding service to his country, including the Secretary of Defense Medal for Freedom. He has a Purple Heart and has been seriously wounded more than once in operations in Iraq and in other countries. John has been key to the success that we have had as an organization that others haven't, and he is the director of our Afghan Relief Task Force. Thank you, John.
Thanks for having me. Okay, did you want to ask me a question, Jason?
Yeah, we've had 2 questions, and everyone, I'd like to add, if you could put a question in the chat box. We'll also have the time to take 2 of your questions, John. But the 2 questions that we keep getting asked is, number 1, how did the collapse of Afghanistan happen so quickly? And then the second question we've been getting is, now that Afghanistan has collapsed, what are the implications for the United States and for Christians and other minorities in Afghanistan? I don't think we have time to answer the second part of that question. So if maybe the 2 questions you can answer for us is, what are the implications, or why did Afghanistan fall so quickly? And to all of our supporters, John called me in July and said by the middle of August, Kabul will have fallen. And sadly, that's exactly what happened. So why did that happen so quickly? And then the second question would be, what are the implications? And there's, for obvious reasons, we couldn't tell you certain facts about what the awards were he won and what the exact university was, and we can't show you John just because of his work that he's doing in the region for us now.
Okay, let me first address the 800-pound gorilla in the room regarding the Afghanistan war. We can never forget that it was Pakistan's military and intelligence establishment that played the principal role in creating the Taliban in the 1990s, supporting it through the 9/11 attacks and providing every and all means at the country's disposal to ensure a Taliban victory in Afghanistan since it launched its insurgency against US and NATO forces in 2003. So Pakistan has also given safe haven to one of the Taliban's closest allies, Al Qaeda, which is like a brother organization to the Taliban, as incredible as that may sound, and Osama bin Laden, who was hiding in plain sight in Pakistan's Abbottabad, which is only a half-mile from the gate of Pakistan's preeminent military academy. So like their West Point. When the U.S. killed him in 2011. No U.S. president reigned in Pakistan for this, much less made it pay. So we were fighting a war where the enemy, the Taliban and Al Qaeda, could flee to a sanctuary country, regroup, strategize, and direct insurgent and terrorist operations against us with impunity. I would say the second thing that led to the collapse of the Afghan military was actually rooted in peace talks that were launched first by the Obama administration in 2009, 2010. So I don't know if everyone remembers, there was a troop surge, 2 troop surges in 2009, one in February and one in December, bringing the U.S. troop count over 100,000. But simultaneously, the president announced that it would be for an 18-month timeline. So in effect, signaling what we were going to be doing to the enemy. And simultaneously, we began back-channel peace talks with the Taliban that largely didn't involve the Afghan government. And the peace talks that we had, which were known as the Doha Agreement under the Trump administration, didn't involve the Afghan government at all, which completely delegitimized that government in the eyes of the Afghan people who had voted for the Afghan president, who had voted for the government. So what happened in entering into peace talks with the Taliban was that we stopped fighting a war to win it, and we entered into a war in which we were trying to exit. So and then the final thing I would say is tactical in nature, and that's that we stopped providing close air support and intelligence for the Afghan military when the Biden administration came in. And the Afghan military was designed to work in tandem with US close air support, and when air support and intelligence, and when we remove those two capabilities from them, we cut them off at the knees.
Sorry, I had it on mute, John M. What are the we're getting some good questions. What are the implications? You talked a lot about this. We're going to be sending out the Afghan Eye, which is our bi-weekly update. I've already read it, that you guys will all be receiving, and it's horrifying to think what the implications are. for us and for Christians and other minorities in Afghanistan. But what and Millie answered this, right? He said we have to expect maybe a terrorist strike in the next 6 months. But what are the implications for the United States now that Afghanistan has completely collapsed?
Well, first of all, think of the government that you have in Afghanistan. So you see the Taliban form a government with more than a dozen members sanctioned for terrorism by the UN Security Council. Two high-ranking members. One of them is almost at the highest rank in the government, are still on the FBI's most wanted list for terrorism. And 5 in the government were formerly held at Guantanamo for having direct involvement in terrorism with Al-Qaeda. And you have our senior officials completely ignoring this, saying that there isn't a connection with them and Al-Qaeda, referring to them as moderate, business-like, our Afghan partners. And this is incredibly dangerous. And so the failure to recognize the Taliban for what it is, and to take, for example, Al-Qaeda's number one, Ayman al-Zawahiri, pledging a blood oath to the head of the Taliban, who is now the head of the Afghan government, a blood oath to him that he will follow him, that Al-Qaeda will follow him. The fact that Al-Qaeda makes up part of the special forces of the Taliban, along with the Haqqani network, which is a United States sanctioned designated terrorist organization, whose one of whose leaders was the number 2 in the Taliban. He's now Minister of Interior, which means he has the power of the director of the FBI and the director of the CIA combined. It has to really be noted in that the U.S. failure in Afghanistan was the first time a government supported by the United States has fallen to Islamic extremists. And this is particularly concerning, given that the Al-Qaeda perpetrators, the murderers of 9/11, planned their attacks on the U.S. while enjoying safe harbor and free reign to plot and train from the Taliban's Afghanistan. So you have Islamist extremists and terrorists throughout the world viewing Afghanistan as this monumental historic victory, in the same way that they viewed the defeat of the Soviet Union in the 1980s as political Islam's first modern victory against the West. And this energized political Islam throughout the 90s and weaponized it, and its culmination, frankly, was in 9/11. And it can be argued strongly that many terrorist organizations will be inspired to view the U.S. loss in Afghanistan of the defeat of the world's only superpower and the defeat of the West, and a sign that a clash of civilizations war, Islam versus the Judeo-Christian West, is now winnable by the Islamic jihadists. To make matters worse, the US government left behind $85 billion worth of weapons and equipment. So this is equivalent to 85% of the aid that the US has provided to Israel since its founding. And that's larger than the annual military budget for every nation around the world except the US and China. So the Taliban, thanks to the US government, this year has a larger military budget than Russia, the UK, India, France, and so forth. It has 1/10 of the Humvees on the planet. It has more than 600,000 light weapons, 16,000 night vision goggles, eliminating one of the US military's main advantages over the enemy. And now the Taliban and their extremist allies can ride, fly, and use the same weapons to fight, all like their American enemies can. And the I would say finally the disastrous withdrawal and failure to repatriate or destroy $85 billion worth of equipment has also created the great potential, and it's already started, frankly, for the largest and most sophisticated weapons market in history, where global terrorist networks can flock and purchase and use the United States' very own weapons against us.
Yeah, it's horrifying. And as an organization that is committed to standing with the vulnerable around the world, so many places we're standing up against political Islam. I think that we also are probably the most aggressive organization in the world defending Muslims in China and Chinese occupied East Turkestan, and standing with Muslims in Iraq that were suffering under ISIS. But in so many places in the world, we're standing with Christians against political Islam. So to think of this weapons market, and to think of what's happening in Nigeria, happening in the Nuba Mountains of Sudan, and so many other places, that I don't think it's a stretch to think that these weapons are going to find their way to the front against the vulnerable in every corner of the world, and maybe here in the United States. All of the questions we've been getting have to do with this leaving $85 billion of weapons behind. I'm going to ask you two of them kind of as one question. Then I'm going to ask if maybe we can talk about just the failure of the government that you and I have witnessed today, if there's a way to talk about it. But one question is China working through the Taliban? What is the relationship of China with the Taliban, and are they working through the Taliban?
China has an excellent relationship with the Taliban. It recognized the Taliban's government right away. It sent emissaries to Afghanistan, and there have been reports this week, videos of Chinese military aircraft landing at Bagram Air Force Base. So that was the main Air Force base that the U.S. military used. And I think that that's highly likely. What the United States, for the United States, Afghanistan played a pivotal role in what's known as our power projection model, where we have bases all throughout the world and we have alliances all throughout the world, and we like to stop a threat in its tracks by virtue of these bases and these alliances. And Afghanistan was our only base in an incredibly hostile neighborhood, because to the north you have the Russia-dominated Central Asian states. To the west of Afghanistan, you have the United States adversary, Iran. To the south and east, you have a hostile Pakistan. To the northeast, you have our adversary, our opponent, however you want to phrase it, China. So we just lost that. We just lost all of our not only our counterterrorism capabilities that you mentioned, Jason, about the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff talking about terrorist threats emanating from Afghanistan. So did the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, which is DoD's version of CIA. So did the head of the FBI. So a whole litany of people now are talking about, it's not a question of if it's going to happen, but when. And but now we not only do not have counterterrorism capabilities in Afghanistan, we also don't have capabilities in order to compete in peer-to-peer competition against China, against Russia, against Iran, against Pakistan, and gather intelligence from that area. So let me give you quickly an example. So a drone's battery life is typically 16 hours. So from Afghanistan, we could send an intelligence drone on a particular mission, and it could use the full 16 hours to collect intelligence and return to base. Now we have to send the same drone from the Persian Gulf, which takes 7 hours to, up and 7 hours back. So it only has 2 hours of operational time. Now, that's just one example.
And we've got so many questions, but the one question is, I don't think you can answer, why did we do this?
Utter incompetence. Utter incompetence on the part of our leadership. Utter incompetence.
And there's two questions I want to answer.
And it's a damn good question.
Yeah, and I don't think we can wrap our mind around any sensible, ethical, moral answer. And then maybe just a little glimpse of what we're dealing with bumping into our own government. Is there a way for us to talk about what happened today to an American citizen in Kabul? Can we talk about that, or should we let it pass?
Sure. So someone that we're talking to, an American citizen who bravely served our special operations forces in Afghanistan, has been repeatedly, for lack of a better expression, jerked around by the State Department, told to hunker in place. And first, when we were evacuating, when we still had military planes, he was told to hunker in place, and that he would get a call just to wait, don't come to the airport. He called, eventually kept trying to call, and by the time he finally reached someone, all the planes had gone. Then he was set to be put on another evacuation plane. It didn't materialize. He was just set to be put on another one, and got to the airport, did everything they said for him to do, and that didn't materialize. And here is the kicker for me. This is what infuriates me so much. He had to give his data, his personal information, and the personal information of his wife, to the State Department, who in turn gave it to the Taliban to get him through the checkpoints at the airport. So they know who he is now. So he is in much more danger now than he was if he hadn't dealt with them in the first place. And it's heartbreaking. So we're going to do everything that we can in our power. We're going to get him out. That's all.
All right, John. Well, we're going to have you back on. We're going to do these Zoom calls regularly. And I know for so many of you, this is a lot of information, and you can't do Zoom calls regularly. So we're creating something called the Afghan Eye that John will put together. John's briefed presidents face-to-face on this country, and now he'll be briefing our supporters. This is information he's been giving to me and our team as we have to make decisions on how and when we should move folks. Something that's been so frustrating with this American citizen today is we were getting ready to move him, and he was all ready to go, and then the U.S. said, no, we have a better way for you, and it just seemed to be a distraction. We saw the same thing with the religious order early on, that we were getting ready to move, and the U.S. government came in and said they were going to move them, told us they did move them, and it wasn't for 24 hours that we found out they weren't moved, and it made it impossible for us to rescue them. And by God's grace, the Italian government went in and rescued this religious order. But this is what we've been bumping up against. And the reason I wanted to share that is so much of what we're doing, we're asking ourselves, shouldn't the U.S. government be doing this? But they're not. And so we as Christians are committed to standing with our co-religionists, and also to stand with those who stood shoulder to shoulder with John as he fought, with my son fought. So we see this as something very important to do. There is one question. John, thank you very much. And we're looking forward to having you back on one of these Zoom calls.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.
And there are very long podcasts that we've done, and we'll be doing more as well. If you go to the Jason Jones Show, you can listen to 2 very long podcasts. The last one we did with John, House Republicans were asked to listen to it. So there's a lot of information there. There's one question that was asked to us privately by one of my heroes, and it was a private question, so maybe she doesn't want her name, but I'm going to read it out loud because it really points to how challenging what we're doing is, and why your support has been so important to us. So this is what we got private message. This is selfish of me, but I just want to know if any of the people that I filled out on your Excel sheets have been saved, the interpreters, etc., from the U.S. veterans that I sent to you. Are they a part of those who have been saved? And so I sent her a message saying, please send us their names. We're keeping a database of everyone. And we're so excited. We get so excited, like today we'll be excited to move names from needing to be rescued to being rescued. That is the very best feeling in the world. And so I don't know if anyone on the Excel files that she filled out and sent to us have been evacuated, have been rescued. Exfiltrated is the word I use, and everyone says stop using exfiltrated. John is saying you're not in the military, stop saying exfiltrated. But so we'll friends, please send us those names again, and we'll bump them up. Send it to Armin. Armin is Armenian, and he's one of the most successful musicians in Hollywood, and he is committed to be helping with us manage the database. Is something I was doing. That's why I wasn't sleeping, because I was getting all the Excel, all the Signal messages and WhatsApp messages and emails and putting them in databases and sending them to all these different large organizations in mid-August. And Armin came on board to manage those files. So friend, we'll find out. But the reason I wanted to share that question is, if you've seen the movie Sophie's Choice, every time, and we had to do this with Juliana, she had a very large list, but we had people already we committed to move, or for different reasons, we thought we had to prioritize them. Sometimes we have to break up families because moving military-age men is very dangerous. So we have to separate the women and children from military-age men to protect the women, but the men don't want to do this, which is for obvious reasons. It's very scary. And so these are the decisions that we are constantly making. It's a decision that I'll have to make tonight when this group gets across. The 2 things I have to do, first and foremost, is we put together who is in most need, who is in most danger. And where do they fit? Obviously, American citizens automatically go to the very top of the list, and Christians, but where do people fit in the need? Has the Taliban knocked down their door? Have they been asked to report to the police station? And then we have to weigh all of these facts. And then we build the next list to evacuate. Each evacuation costs $75,000. So we're basically spending more money every 2 weeks than what has been our previous annual budget in these constant movements. Like I said, we're a small organization. Through Movie to Movement, we raise money and create LLCs to partner with film companies to make movies that have messages that promote human dignity. Through the Vulnerable People Project, we write white papers, ghostwrite op-eds, and do what we can to influence larger, more powerful organizations. But for us, this has been where we've had to ramp up fast, because we find that we are the organization that is effectively moving people. There's something that John put together that's going to be very successful in moving people to safety for months and months and months to come. So, but that's all been thanks to your support. I'll see, we've went way over what we scheduled, and I don't know how this thing works, Tiana, if we turn into a pumpkin at any point and it just shuts off. But look for the Afghan Eye. There was a news story. We rescued 2 people for Catholic News Agency today, and they wanted to write a story about it. And I begged them, you can't write a story about what you experienced and your people experienced and how we did what we did. Yet, we of course, obviously, as an organization, we're eager to share our successes and how we've accomplished our goals. So Catholic News Agency wrote, maybe Tiana, you could share it in the comment box. Catholic News Agency wrote a very thoughtful article where they quoted me on why they can't write an article on what we've done and what they've been witnessing. And I will say that LifeSite News and LifeFunder have been key to what we've been able to do. EWTN News Nightly and Catholic News Agency has been working with us since the middle of August. And there are so many stories, especially Juliana can attest to this, in the wild days, from August 13th forward, when we had planes and the borders were more porous. There's so many stories where we were successful in getting large groups of people out. Then after the withdrawal, it became a much more challenging, and the numbers have become much smaller for now, when we're eager for the airport to open. But we're so excited to tell these stories. But I'm grateful to EWTN and Catholic News Agency and LifeSite News and LifeFunder. And I think some of you probably never knew of us, and you're here today because you supported us through LifeFunder. So with that, our website is thegreatcampaign.org. And if you have a family foundation, or if you know folks who can support us, and know each movement costs $75,000, we pay for one movement at a time. After a movement is successful, then we put together our next group of folks to move. And Americans are the most expensive, and they're very challenging, but they are our priority. Like this American today, who was not only lured to the airport only to be abandoned, he was relatively safe and hiding where he was, but now he is on the radar of the Taliban in a very obvious way. So you have saved lives. Those of you who are here, you have saved lives. If you did not respond to our emails, if you did not respond to LifeFunder when the US withdrawal happened and the planes stopped, we would have had no options. But because even with LifeSite News, I said, I'm sorry I'm talking so much, but even with LifeSite News, I said, we only need to raise about $100,000 to build this team that I need to manage all of the requests and to get them on the planes. And we're not going to need to raise more than that. And then we had 200,000 and 300,000. And I think we're now over to 325,000 just through LifeFunder. And then of course, many of you are donating directly to thegreatcampaign.org. What happened was, thanks to John and some of our other friends and partners that came from the most unusual places, we were able to continue immediately rescuing people whose lives they would be dead today if not for people stepping up and donating. So with that, I really can't thank you enough. I've been doing this work for almost 3 decades, and I was in Sudan during the genocide. I was in Iraq with John, documenting it during ISIS, the time of ISIS. John has 3 Purple Hearts, and he's witnessed war for 2 decades up close and personal. But for me, being in this room, helping people where I'm going to leave and have dinner with my family and play catch with my kids, and know that the people I'm trying to help are in mortal danger. It's been the single, much more challenging than being in Sudan or being in Iraq. For me, it has been the single most challenging project of my life, because we are literally on the phone with these people, talking to them, FaceTiming them nightly, as John is, and we're in constant communication. Most of our time is spent working with the people in country to comfort them, to work to get them out of really bad situations and into safety. And all of this has been made possible thanks to you. So with that, Tiana, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Again, if you guys should be looking out in your emails for the Afghan Eye. If you have any burning questions that you still would like to ask, you can direct them to me. Personally, I'll put it in the chat for you right now. Comment.com. So go ahead and send me an email, and I can forward it over to Jason. And with that being said, have a great rest of your evening, and we hope that you can, continue to see the good work that Jason's doing in Vulnerable People Project. Aloha.